This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
Greatness, it may be closer than you think. Author, speaker, and business consultant Pam Bilbrey on this edition of Conversations. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you so very much for joining us. We are pleased to have as our guest today Pam Bilbrey. She has written a book. It's entitled Ordinary Greatness, published by Wiley out of New York. And of course, I want to give your co-writer a plug as well, Brian Jones. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm thrilled to be here.
Before we get off into talking about what the book is all about, by the way, it's entitled Ordinary Greatness. Tell us a little bit about your business career. How did it start?
Oh my goodness, a long time ago. It started actually when I was at Florida State University with this dream to become a daycare center owner. Which I never ended up doing. Somehow life didn't take me in that direction. I ended up as a psychotherapist for a lot of years. And from there, I launched into the business part of healthcare. And one thing led to another with a very long career in healthcare, 30 years, which I loved every second of. And now I'm broadening that career to not only cover healthcare, but all sorts of businesses. So I'm having lots of fun.
So you recently left the day-to-day grind, so to speak, of corporate America and have branched out. And how do you like being out on your own like that?
I love it. I love the excitement of being responsible totally for everything I'm doing. It's a little scary at times, but it's very exciting.
The book is Ordinary Greatness. Now, what is ordinary greatness?
You know, it's a term we made up. Can you believe that?
Hard to believe.
It is. The whole idea from the book came from an article that my co-author Brian and I saw in the Washington Post a couple of years ago. We happened to be traveling together for a client site, and we went through Atlanta. And of course, what always happens in Atlanta, you're delayed, right?
You're delayed, right?
Absolutely. 3 hours that particular day. So we went to find some reading material and came back and sat at the concourse and read. And as we read, Brian all of a sudden yells out, "Awesome!" And I'm like, "Brian," he goes, "No, awesome, this is so awesome." And he was referring to an article that was in the Washington Post that morning, and it was called Pearls Before Breakfast. And he says, "You have got to read this article. It's incredible." So I read the article, and I looked at Brian and I said, "Wow." Because the article is about an experiment that the Post did a couple of years ago now. And they placed a gentleman by the name of Joshua Bell. You may recognize his name. He's one of the premier violinists ever to be. They placed him in the metro station in Washington, D.C. early one morning, incognito. He was dressed in his blue jeans and his long sleeve t-shirt and his Washington Nationals ball cap. And he took his violin, of course a Stradivari, and placed it just like a street musician would and started playing. Well, this incredible music. But it was so interesting as people at the metro station were passing by, they didn't bother to stop, really glance at him, pay him any attention at all. I mean, he was making a lot of music, very loud. And the whole idea of the experiment was to see if we would notice beauty and art in unexpected places.
Did I read in the book where the night before he had played a big venue somewhere else and people had paid huge amounts of money to see him?
Absolutely, several $100s a seat for the less than good seats. You know, and so it's very difficult to get tickets to his concerts. They sell out almost immediately, and he's won almost every award you could think of for a classical musician. So he's a big name, and he's very, very well respected. And his violin playing is supposed to be second to none. Yet in the metro station, because he looked so ordinary, because it was an ordinary place in everyday circumstances, people didn't notice.
And how long did this go on? How long did the experiment go on?
It was for about an hour, and in that hour, he collected $32.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because after he had completed the experiment, he talked with the reporter, and he said, "You know, I didn't expect people to stop for long periods of time and listen to me because, they're rushing to work, and I understand that. He says, but for no one really to take the time to listen, to stop, really astounded me, really caught him off guard.
What did you conclude the reason why people were not paying attention?
Well, it's interesting because Brian and I decided that we would do our own research, and we started interviewing people all over the country, several hundred people we personally interviewed, and then we did web-based interviews. And we asked one question.
And that was?
And think of 3 people who represent greatness to you, living or dead, 3 people, top of mind. And we collected all of those names. And there were 4 individuals that stood out. People that no matter the age of the person, the geographic location, or the sex of the individual respondent, they all seemed to mention.
And they were?
Number 1, Mother Teresa.
Okay.
And, that
That's
might be
understandable.
expected.
Sure,
okay.
sure.
Second was Gandhi.
Okay.
Okay. After that was Jesus Christ. And then we started getting into some folks like Oprah Winfrey.
Okay.
Bill Gates, Abe Lincoln. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
Yeah. Martin Luther King was also very, very high on the list. But the top 4 were actually Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, and Jesus Christ. And that was just a strong showing. And what was really interesting, Jeff, as we talked to people, most everyone's heard those names before,
Sure.
and they're very highly regarded as religious figures or humanitarians, people that maybe we strive to be. But what we didn't hear were things like, well, my mom,
Right.
or my neighbor, or someone that's touched my life, someone that's impacted me.
Right.
And so we began to ask people that question, well, who do you know that possesses greatness? And we got such fascinating answers. People would say, well, my Aunt Susie, I think she's great, but I'm not so sure you would think she was great.
Right.
Or my dad, he was so great, and I think he possessed greatness, but he also had a downside. And so the idea of ordinary greatness is expanding that definition of what great is. Because if you put the word ordinary and greatness together, it's almost like an oxymoron, isn't it?
Right,
You don't
right,
usually
right.
put
Sure,
those 2 words
sure,
together.
sure. I saw or read in the book where I think it was you had a quote from Charles Schultz, who I guess one of his favorite things. Will you tell the story to talk about it? Expand on it.
Okay, he was the cartoonist that
Right.
did Peanuts.
Peanuts.
And what he used to ask people is to think about who's made an impact on their life. And as he talked with people about that, he found out that the people we remember, the people who truly made an impact on our lives were our 5th grade teacher, our baseball coach, those individuals, not those high up figures of authority or those heroes in the media.
Right.
That we really remember long time, that we can actually pinpoint changed us in a very positive way.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of neat that he said, nobody can name the last 5 Heisman Trophy winners or the last 5 Miss Americas or whatever, but you
or
remember
even the last 5 presidents.
Yeah,
nowadays.
in some cases that's true. But they remember, like you said, the 5th grade teacher, the person that gave them the little extra push. And I want to come to in just a second of how that equates into the business world. But why do you think right now that we are such, and it seems to me like more so than ever before, a celebrity-obsessed culture? We're more, you famous for being famous type scenario. Why is that?
Yeah, I think we get caught up in the media portrayals and the name recognitions, and we just are bombarded with that information, and it just kind of imprints on our brain, and we don't stop to think about what are they actually doing that's making an impact on someone's life. We just recognize their face, recognize their name, and we're so busy. Everyone is so busy. We just don't stop to think it through.
Do you think the media has a responsibility to try to focus on people who really make a difference as opposed to people who just make a name?
I think that there are some great examples of the media doing just that. of really recognizing individuals who are not celebrities, who aren't well known, who will never be well known, but are making amazing impacts in their local neighborhoods, in their churches, with individuals. So yeah, I think there is a nice balance that we've got to bring to everyone's attention.
Let's come back to ordinary greatness here. Talk about this and how it applies in the business world.
You know, it's interesting. Let me just say that it was written as a leadership book for the business world, but what has happened, it has taken off. And we've had schools that have asked us to come in and speak with kids about what's happening among peer groups and how ordinary greatness is impacting what they do and don't do. Parenting groups have asked us to come in and talk about, well, how does this concept apply to parenting? But it was written for the business world. And the whole concept behind the book is that everything any organization needs to be incredibly successful, they already have. It's already there in the workforce. It's just waiting to be tapped. But unfortunately, so many organizations and so many leaders get so caught up in the everyday trappings of business and just the busyness that surrounds them that they miss the opportunity to take individuals and help them be incredibly successful, which means that the organization, the business, can be incredibly successful.
You had a story in the book that I thought was really neat, where there was a new chief executive that came into a business, and I guess he gathered the team around and started asking them questions, and basically found out that they didn't know a whole lot about what was going on. And I don't want to tell the story. You expand on that, how he took his executives and started walking around the company.
Well, you know, it was very true. The new CEO that came into the company had been at an organization that really worked very hard to recognize the individuals for the value that were contributing and the success that they played in the organization's success. But as he came into this new company and started meeting with the senior leadership, he found that they really did not know a lot about what was going on outside the doors of the senior leader suite. And he took them out into the organization and helped them to interact with individuals. They walked around, and each and every time the executives that he took out into the organization learned incredible things through just very everyday conversations with the staff that worked there. They heard new ideas of what could make the organization successful. They heard new ideas of how employees could get more involved. It turned out to be an incredible turnaround for that organization, that simple act of really understanding, listening, and soliciting ideas from everyone in the organization.
I thought it was also another interesting point, and please expand on this, but that maybe the most important thing in motivating employees was not the almighty dollar.
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, we've heard that through studies, that you have to have a certain level of income, but after that, it really is about helping people feel that they make a difference, that they're contributing, they're of value. And if you look at all the studies, you'll see that in and out. And I mean, it's so true. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this. You know, a story that comes to mind, I was in an organization recently and had given a presentation, and afterwards a lady came up to me and she said, "Can I speak to you for a moment?" And I go, "Yeah, sure." And she goes, "I just want to tell you that I'm very distraught." I says, "Okay, well, let's go over here in the corner and we'll chat for a moment."
Right.
She goes, "You're not going to believe what happened to me last week." I go, "Tell me." She goes, "It was my 15-year anniversary last week with the organization." And she says, "My boss came by my desk, threw a brown envelope on my desk, and walked away." And she goes, "I opened it up, and it was my 15-year certificate and a pen." She goes, "He didn't even bother to say thank you for 15 years of loyalty to the company, didn't even say congratulations." And she goes, "That just crushed me." So it wasn't a matter of the dollars that was important to her. It was just being appreciated for her efforts and her participation in the company.
Why do managers do that?
Well, you know, there are 5 blinders that we found. And I think these are blinders that we all wear. And they apply not only to managers and organizations, they apply to you and I, Jeff, in our everyday lives. One is that we have preconceived notions. You know, we just put people in boxes, and we tell a great story in here about the perfect example of that is the film Good Will Hunting. If you recall, they had the janitor who was able to solve this complex math equation. And the professor could not believe it was the janitor. So, because he had preconceived notions that a janitor could not possibly be that smart. And we all know that's not true. Another is premature cognitive commitments, and that simply means is we make up our mind about something too early, before we have all the information, before we have all the facts. Sometimes that's good. You know, if we're putting our pants on in the morning, we don't have to stop and think about it, just as a habit. But often that can work against us, and we put up these barriers because we have these predetermined decisions. External focus is sometimes we get caught up in the trappings, and this may relate to the question you had about the celebrities and the heroes. We get caught up in the trappings of people, the person with the nice car, the big house, the big office. And the perfect example of this most recently was Susan Boyle. Remember her on Britain's Got Talent? And how when she first walked out on the stage, the judges and the audience, if you watch the video of that, really kind of heckled her because she didn't look like this famous songstress. And her body language was a little quirky, but the moment she opened her mouth, it was incredible. But people prejudged based on external appearance. But the one that everybody talks about is busyness. Just people are so incredibly busy that they just don't stop to notice what's happening around them. It's just do, just get it done. You know, Nike said it, I think, just do it. That's sort of our mantra, isn't it?
I think you'd mentioned in the book, this just gets into checking that list, that list.
Yeah, check the box. It's all about check the box, did this, got it done. And we just blind ourselves to all of this amazing work and happenings and events that are occurring all around us, and we miss out so much. So what happens in businesses when leaders don't recognize this ordinary greatness, then the individuals within that organization, their morale tends to go down. But more than that, they miss the opportunity to leverage that greatness to have even more impact on the organization.
Considering the fact that there is so much noise surrounding our day-to-day life, would it be incumbent upon the employee to attempt, and I don't mean in an arrogant way, but to attempt in a way to, I hate to use this word, but to promote themselves a little bit more? Is that a good idea from an employee standpoint?
You know, I often get asked that question, is my boss doesn't recognize, what can I do? I can't do anything. I says, well, yes, you can. You know, you're your own best supporter, and you have to often let your boss know that you've made strides of the work that you're doing. And so I never hesitate to tell people that's a good thing. You know, and you do it in a way that has humility with it. But that can help a leader, a boss, begin to understand that, wow, I need to be more open to what's happening around me.
And how about the leader? The manager of the organization, what do they need to do in order to consciously start finding this ordinary greatness?
Well, as one thing they can do is really think through the blinders that are prohibiting them from seeing the greatness. But it gets back to being out and about and interacting with employees and being available. We call it visibility, approachability, and accessibility. Because if you're not interacting and building relationships with employees, then you're not approachable. And that's almost a kiss of death for a leader, isn't it? Because then you're not hearing the good things or the bad things that are happening in the organization. You're sort of barricaded behind these walls, and you don't have the best information to make decisions. You're out of the loop on what's really happening, and you just can't really do the role of leadership justice.
Should your approach be different depending on what level of leadership you're at? So in other words, would a middle manager have a different approach than, say, the chief executive officer?
Maybe in the very granular approach, but overall I think that the emphasis is being available, being visible, being very open, listening is an incredible amount of listening, asking questions. What can we do better in this organization? Where are we doing well? Where do you see we're not doing so well? How can I better support you? There's just not enough conversation going on between employees and their supervisor, leader, senior leader. Just conversations.
And that's right.
That's what we're talking
Name
about.
Of the show. People will tell you, I mean, business leaders will always tell you the toughest part about the job is finding good people, but yet they don't treat their people oftentimes the way they should. I mean, why?
Almost every annual report I've ever read, almost every executive I've heard give their annual report to the board says people are our most valuable asset. Right? Yet there are very few companies I can think of that actually live that day in and day out, because it's just something that we expect to say. What it really means, if you're living it, is that all your decisions and all your actions support that statement, and that you are focused on your people. I just was in Washington earlier this week, and I heard Tom Peters speak. And I love Tom Peters. And the bottom line after an hour and a half of his presentation was, it is about the people in our organizations. And ordinary greatness is our way of hopefully encouraging leaders to stop the busyness of doing reports, sitting in meetings, doing emails, whatever it is they're doing that's preventing them from interacting with the individuals that they supervise, that they lead, from listening to them, from asking questions, from having that relationship that helps the leader be better and encourages the employee to be more than they ever thought possible. Because you have to go into it with a mindset that every person has amazing capabilities, and it's my job as a leader to help bring that out.
What's the difference between a leader and a manager?
Well, a leader is that individual that is there to help that employee be the best they can be. And it's all about inspiring them to be more, to become, to encourage them. Where the manager, we tend more to be related to the business results, getting the reports done, getting the products moved to market, more tangible business metrics.
Are you both if you're good, or does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I've seen a lot written about that question: can you be a leader and a manager? I personally think you can, but it's really difficult. It's really difficult because what happens if you're in a leadership role where you're also managing a lot on a day-to-day operations on a day-to-day basis, you take care of the crises.
Right.
And the things that are right in front of you, and you don't really get to the aspect of leading people as much. That I'll get to that tomorrow.
Right.
I know I've got to do it. I'll do that tomorrow, but then tomorrow something else comes up that needs your immediate attention.
Are the dynamics of the business world changing, and are they going to change more as more and more women get into leadership roles?
Well, right now is over half of the professionals and managers in the U.S. are female. So, it's changed a lot in the last 20 years as far as professional and management positions. Hasn't changed so much when you look at females in the highest level positions. Still that glass ceiling that everybody talks about, it's still there. I think it's got a crack in it.
Right.
But it's still there.
It's still there.
But I think what may be influencing leadership and management style more so even in the years to come is the diversity of the age groups in the workforce. In the next 5 years, there's going to be so many different generations in the same workforce working side by side. Right. And we think about work differently. Right. And the way we approach work is very different. So a leader has to understand each individual, because no longer, maybe in years past, where you had a homogeneous type of generation of the workforce, could you make assumptions about how to manage, how to lead? Now, with every generation, it's a little bit different in order to tap into what we call their discretionary effort to inspire them.
Getting a little bit short on time, but tell me, of the leaders out there, who does Pam Bilbrey look at and say, boy, I admire the way they do things?
Oh, wow. There are so many. There are tremendous leaders here in Pensacola. There are leaders that I have met in my clients across the country, and then there's those national thought leaders that I read about. Right. And I'm not sure, Jeff, there's one or two particular people, but when you ask the question, I saw this flashing in my mind, and it was a word, and the word is integrity.
Right.
Is what I have learned the most in all of the great leaders that I've had a chance to meet and learn from, is that word integrity and how important that is in any leadership role you have.
The book is available if someone is interested, and we certainly hope they are. It's a very, very good book,
well,
I have to
thank you.
say.
We're excited.
And I think it's interesting because when I first picked it up, I was sort of thinking it's going to be more business-oriented and leadership-oriented, and it is, but it's certainly applicable to folks' day-to-day life, to your day-to-day life. So where is it available? It's
available at local bookstores. All the online bookstores would easily have it.
Okay, very good. And it's published by Wiley & Sons?
John Wiley & Son out of New York.
Out of New York City. So it's a pretty big deal.
Well, we're excited.
Well, it's a great book, and Brian Jones is your co-author, and I guess you guys work together on several things. So.
Yeah, we do. We've got another book in the making right now that we're contemplating and beginning to outline. So we had so much fun writing this together. We're such opposite personalities that we play off of each other. So we're going to give it another try.
Okay, good deal. Any hint about what it's about? Or is
it is called The Bounce Back Leader.
Okay, great.
And it's about leaders who have a stumble in their career and how they bounce back.
Wonderful. Pam Bilbrey, it's been a pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so
you.
much, Jeff.
It's absolutely our pleasure. Ordinary Greatness is the name of the book. It's very, very good. Pick it up, local bookstores or online. Pam Bilbrey has been our guest for this edition of Conversations. We thank you so very much for spending some time with us. By the way, love to hear from you. We're on the web, WSRE.org/conversations, and you can also go on Facebook and find us at Conversations with Jeff Weeks. We'd love to hear from you. Wishing you all the very best. Take good care of yourself. I'm Jeff Weeks. We'll see you later.